Hi, I'm Paul Duchesne. Welcome to Mama Paul's video podcast. Today is the last day in October and it's Halloween, which is why I'm wearing my Scream tie, little off-green shirt, and I'm going to put on a little makeup later and a little clown, that scary clown kind of look. Okay, having said that, I apologize. I've been off the air for almost a month now. Had to go back east for the third wedding this year, so I've been back for 2 grandchildren and 1 niece, and the weddings have just been absolutely marvelous. Really nice going back for the weddings. Having said that, the rest of the time in Jersey can get a little bit weird. And just to sum it up, at the worst of times, I think California is still the best of places. And this is not the first, not the second, it's the third time that I've come back to California. I've literally kissed the ground in the state here, in spite of the fires, in spite of the floods, which we had last week, which is another reason why I'm a little late. We had almost had a river running through the studio here for almost a week, and I was involved with a wet vac and drying towels, and well, the whole thing took quite a bit of time and energies. But here we are. We're finally back with a little show, so it's the first one in a while. And I'm going to open up with an obituary, and the obituary is some of you may hopefully be familiar with, Mort Sahl. Mort Sahl was one of my cultural heroes going back into the 60s, and Mort Sahl started, I believe he started at the Hungry Eye, much like Lenny Bruce. And Mort Sahl was a really interesting comedian. He used to be on the stage, and he would show up with a newspaper, and he had the newspaper folded, and he had some notes on the paper. And if you'll notice on that picture up here in back of me, you'll see he's got a left, right, and center on the left and the right. So what he would do is he would talk about different politicians and different people in the news, and he would put them into a category, whether they were on the left, whether they were more progressive, more progressive, more liberal, or whether they were more conservative on the right. And he would put them all into categories. So in other words, somebody like Henry Kissinger, for instance, would wind up somewhere, to the right of maybe Attila the Hun. Mort Sahl was a huge fan and friend of John Kennedy, President Kennedy. And after Kennedy was assassinated, he was really upset by the whole thing. And then a few years later, when the Warren Commission came out, when the Warren Commission report came out, with the famous bullet that made about 15 turns before it went through 2 people, he just didn't buy the whole thing. And much like Lenny Bruce, who went from being a comic critic to being a non-comic critic, Mort Sahl sort of did the same thing. He went from the comic kind of criticism with the sharp edges to being not so funny. And he wound up basically reading the Warren report, page after page. And he just didn't buy it. He didn't buy the fact that this magic bullet flew all over the place, and he believed that it was a CIA conspiracy to assassinate Kennedy, which I totally on the same page with Mort Sahl on that one. I could probably join him on the 9/11 Commission too if he was around. He'd probably have something to say about that. But Mort Sahl was not. He was insensitive, both the left and the right. He would criticize people on both sides. It didn't matter whether they were the latte liberals from the Upper East Side or whether they were these far-right yahoos. He would go after both sides with equal gusto. And I really liked that about him. One of his famous jokes more recently about George Bush was he did this little routine where he talks about George Bush being questioned by his son. And what did you do in the war, Daddy? And the response is George Bush's response is, well, I started the war. And that's sort of about where Mort Sahl was at. Well, he was 93 years old, and like I said, with the Warren Commission thing, he pretty much got disenfranchised from the establishment. So up till then, up till the Warren Commission, he was very popular, getting booked on television in major events all over the country. After he started doing this Warren Commission reading, he was getting less and less and less bookings. And over the years, all through the 80s and into the part of the 90s, he played college circuits and really small clubs. He didn't get the big venues anymore. And that's pretty much what happens if you cross the establishment. You get squished by the establishment. And the way you get squished in this establishment is you don't make the money you used to make. So anyway, he retired to Mill Valley here, and like I said, he was a real icon of mine. And he appeared at he was at the Starlight Club in San Francisco about 15 years ago, and I went to see him with some friends, and he had learned his lesson, and he wasn't as sharp and cutting as he used to be. The biggest funny joke was the George Bush joke that I just mentioned, which wasn't exactly, that terrific. I felt he was really like vanilla ice cream, that he had lost his edge and was complicit in order to maintain some status quo, which may or may not have been true. I don't know. But anyway, he died of natural causes. You don't find out too many people in the news die of natural causes nowadays. Most people are cancer and heart problems and things like that. All right, so Mort Sahl. Let's get Mort down, and from the board, let's get him down. We'll take that down, and let's put up, we'll do a little thing here on the, this is just absolutely mortifying what's going on here. What you're looking at is a website here. It's the Right to Know Review. And the Right to Know Review, if you look closely there at the bottom of the page there, you'll notice that the FDA has approved the use of 2,4-D. It's an herbicide, and it's in the same category as the glyphosates and Roundup. And the FDA, under Tom Vilsack, and I am not a fan of Tom Vilsack on any level. He has been in and around the FDA for about I think he was there with Bush. No, he was there with Obama. I know he was there with Trump, and he's still there right now. And if you go to my website, greenagevideo.com, there's an essay I wrote about Vilsack a few years ago. He's a real piece of work, and he is part of our new, improved, progressive democratic establishment. Anyway, American regulators have approved a new genetically modified what they call 2,4-D, 2,4-D. It's a new genetically modified basically so you can spray it and the crops will be tolerant to it, just like Monsanto. So you would spray Monsanto on the crops and the crops would be tolerant to it. It would kill everything around them. Well, this is the same thing. It's the same thing, and it's being sprayed directly on with these herbicides. And they've also approved Dow Chemicals, what they're calling Enlist Duo, which is a combination of glyphosates, which is the main ingredient in your Roundup, and the 2,4-D. So critics have called this a disturbing, to say the least, a disturbing industry-wide trend in which intensive spraying on herbicide-tolerant, genetically engineered crops triggers evolution of weeds resistant to the chemicals. Now, this is what happened with Roundup. So they originally started using Roundup, and they sprayed so much of the Roundup that these monster weeds started growing up around them. And they had to increase the toxicity of the Roundup over the years. Well, now Roundup, if you're watching television, you'll see an ad almost every night for people that have developed non-Hodgkin's lymphoma, NHL. And there's a legal firm that's always trying to get people who have been affected by this. It's in the courts right now, and there's a woman right now, and it's been in for 3 months, and it should get settled in the next 2 weeks. I had a relative, my brother-in-law back east, had non-Hodgkin's lymphoma. He used Roundup extensively in a garden, and he got it too. So this is not stuff to mess with. I'll put you over here 1 second. The book over here, Genetic Roulette. If you want to find out more about genetically modified foods, Jeffrey Smith, Genetic Roulette. This is the Bible of GMOs. Check it out. Another piece of unfortunately bad news. The last piece I'll give you, let's get that down. Boom, boom, and let's bring up the last one, which will be, this This was a full page that was in Harper's Magazine this week. And it's our society is really totally nuts. I saw that and I was wondering, I said, yeah, I ought to try to double check that. So I don't know if Fauci actually said that, but Harper's Magazine has, I've never known them to have anything in there that wasn't verifiable or true. And it's a direct quote from Fauci. Our society is really totally nuts. I couldn't think of anything more appropriate. And the reason I put it up there right now was it sort of fit into the bit about Biden heading off to Europe. He's in Europe right now, and he was met with the Pope the other day, and now he's over at, I believe, Glasgow, Scotland for the climate conference, where there are, I think there's 10,000 more people in the town than they have rooms for in the town. So I imagine that a lot of climate activists are sleeping in their cars or tents or whatever. The thing that struck me was he's off to this conference after these intensive weeks of all this negotiating over this Build Back Better bill that included the climate money for the climate change and everything. And it seems to me he's going off with a bag of dog shit in his hands. We are 40th in the world for forget the climate thing is one thing. And I'll get to that. There's a positive news about climate change and the ability to get at that. We've got 2 Democratic senators and the rest of the Republican Party completely holding up all these social programs. We are 40th in the world for paid leave. We are 40th in the world on paid leave. If you look at every social program and you compare us to the European countries or even a lot of some third world countries and a lot of even Far Eastern countries, we wind up 40th, 50th, 60th, sometimes, way toward the end on all of these social programs. We look more like a third world country than some third world countries. And it's getting to the point where it's getting like really, really ludicrous. And as the headline says there, we'll throw it up one more time in case you, let's put it one more time. Our society is really, really, totally nuts. All right, well, we'll get that down and move on from that. Let's see, we get that out of there. Okay. I wanted to give a quick little update on the Steve Donzinger story. We talked about this back in August, and Stephen, one of the listeners out there, Stephen, asked me to follow up on this. And Steve Donzinger is the attorney who has been under house arrest for years now. He's the guy that went after a Chevron for them for the pollution they did in Ecuador. And he won a multi-million-dollar settlement, which has never been paid yet. And they have gone after this guy relentlessly with truckloads. I mean, hundreds. There's over 200 lawyers have been going after this guy. They've gotten him disbarred from New York. And right now, he's been in trial for a contempt of court. He's been sentenced, and he's in jail. I believe he's in jail as of today. They denied him bail pending his appeal. They denied bail pending the appeal. He's in jail for 6 months for a contempt of court. This is a lawyer who's been fighting Chevron for these indigenous people in Ecuador who were their whole environmental situation completely screwed by these people dumping this oil all over the place. 60 law firms, 2,000 lawyers, 60 law firms, over 2,000 lawyers is what Chevron sunk on this one guy. He winds up right now in jail. So, Steve, that's the update. We're not winning on that one, I'll tell you that. Okay. That's the end of the weirdy stuff. Let's see if we can find some positive news here. Some positive news. On the positive side, I'm going to do a bigger story on this in a few days, but I've been working on a piece on microdosing and mindfulness. And if anybody caught the show, Nicole Kidman's little series that was on Nine Perfect Strangers. It was a series, I think it was on Hulu about 2 months ago. And a group of people get invited to this health resort in California. It's supposed to be in California. It's actually not in California. And they're there for about a week or 10 days. And she's microdosing them all along the way. You don't find that out till about the third show in the series. At the end of the day, they all have transformations, major transformations in their life. It's a little bit exotic, but it ultimately has a positive spin on microdosing. With microdosing, you're basically using maybe 1/10 or 1/20th of what would have been in the 60s a normal amount of LSD. You're now using a minor amount of it. Now, my introduction to this came with, spoiler alert, I took LSD in the 60s, and then in the 70s I started mindful meditation. And it was when I started the mindful meditation that I saw the connection between the two. My initial experience on the cushion was extremely similar, almost the exact same thing, a duplication of what happened to me with the LSD. That's when I saw the difference. So for years this has been on my mind, and about 5 years ago a doctor with depression started to microdose, and he came out of the depression, and ever since then major universities have been experimenting with it. I'll talk about this a little bit more in another show, but I just want to do an introduction that the funny thing about this was I finished writing the piece, the 4-page piece I did. And in fact, you can find it also on the Green Age Video website. And within 2 minutes of finishing the piece, I get a tweet comes into me, and the tweet is from Michael Pollan, who wrote the book, How to Change Your Mind, which is about microdosing. So I get the tweet, and he directs me to a website, which is a new website about microdosing. So there seems to be a synchronicity in the air. My comment on the page was holy synchronicity, that I had just finished writing this article. And it's sort of like that with things like that sometimes. When, I think it was Columbo said, when a snowball starts to roll, push it. Well, microdosing may be a doorway into turning some of the people in the society around. If you're wondering whether you should microdose or meditate, I would highly recommend meditation without any drugs. It's a more effective, longer-lasting approach. But if you're a civil servant in the middle of New York and you're getting tested for marijuana and you're looking for some recreational drugs, as I found out, a lot of these people are using microdosing, which is what I wrote about in the thing. So anyway, microdosing and mindfulness to me was a positive sign for the future. The other positive sign was McKibben, Bill McKibben. Bill McKibben was on Rachel Maddow's show the other night. And interestingly, he was talking on the show the other night, he was talking about how there was a $40 trillion endowment. They have gotten commitments from pension funds around the country, endowments, portfolios, and pension funds. They now have commitments just shy of $40 trillion, $40 trillion for people to take their money out of these oil stocks and coal stocks, oil, gas, and coal. The gross domestic product of the United States and Canada combined is less than $40 trillion. So the point McKibben was making is that the politicians may not be able to move us in a direction towards a positive climate results, but Wall Street may be able to move us in a direction of positive climate results. And this is, when you think about this, is really this sort of cutting edge, because you wind up with some of these loony right-wingers running around talking about how the medical establishment, the corporate establishment are the enemies, and then they wind up going after attacking we're going to attack the government, we got to pick up our guns and go defend ourselves against this. So they start with the corporation and the medical establishment, and then they equate that to the government, and then they equate that to picking up a gun and going shooting people. The same corporations that are invested in these things and doing all these weird things are the same corporations that people go out and buy their products and don't even think twice about it. They get on the computer and they buy from Amazon, or they get their Johnson & Johnson product, or you know what I'm talking about. And they don't make a connection. They don't make a connection between what they're yelling about and what they're buying with their money. So McKibben running around doing this, I think this is absolutely fantastic and really, really, really good news. And the other interesting thing about this is, okay, he's on Rachel Maddow, I think like 2 nights ago, maybe 3 nights ago. And I saw this and I was like really interested, and I wanted to double check on the figure. I forgot what the exact dollar figure was that he was talking about. And then I'm reading today's New York Times in the Week in Review, and there's the Bill McKibben, draining money from fossil fuels, and I find it right there. It's the $40 trillion. What Rachel has on her show frequently, you will find in the newspaper the next day, either in the Wall Street Journal, the New York Times, major newspapers, things that are on Chris Hayes, Rachel Maddow, are frequently in the newspapers the next day. The only thing that's on Fox News the next day is a criticism of what some idiot is saying on Fox News. Fox News is nothing but propaganda, right and left, all day long. And that's what a lot of these folks are all listening to. And the example came right to the fore. I had this other little article here. Tucker Carlson draws criticism for a series on the Capitol riot. Tucker Carlson, who's like a top-rated guy on Fox News, he's got a little series, an 84-second trailer was on about a 3-part series he's doing called Patriot Purge. Patriot Purge. They included the baseless suggestion that the riot, the January 6th riot, was a false flag operation created to demonstrate, to demonize the political right. Carlson is saying that the January 6th insurrection by these Proud Boys, sent there by Donald Trump, this whole thing, that this was an Antifa plot to discredit the right wing. Even Geraldo Rivera on Fox News, and this is what I'm saying is the good news, the Fox News, Geraldo Rivera gets on television. He says, I worry that I'm probably going to get in trouble for this, and he probably will at Fox News. But I'm wondering how much is done to provoke rather than illuminate. In other words, he realizes that Carlson is a provocateur. He will say almost anything to provoke a response. So, anyway, Geraldo Rivera thinks that knows that the January 6th riot was instigated by Donald Trump and carried out by right-wing extremists, and he thinks Tucker Carlson is full of shit. And he says this, I think he said it on the show. So I thought that was good news too. You had a little positive news coming from Fox News of all places. I'm at 23 minutes right now. I'm going to end up with a little a movie review. I go to plays and I watch a lot of movies. And about a week ago, my son came over and we were going to choose between 4 movies. And he wanted to watch Cruella, which I had on my list. Cruella, Cruella. It's the new supposed riff on the 101 Dalmatian movie from years ago that I think Glenn Close was in. Anyway, it's a remake with Emma Thompson and Emma Stone, and the movie is absolutely spectacular. It's almost like a Greek tragedy, and some of the dialogue in it reminds me of Shakespearean soliloquies. I watched the movie 4 times this week. I did. I rented it. I was able to watch it twice, and then I bought it the next night, and I've watched it twice since then. And the acting in it is superb. The casting was really good. And like I said, it's almost like a Greek tragedy. The relationship between the mother and the daughter is absolute. It's Medea, to say the least. It's like the Greek tragedy Medea. Highly recommend Cruella. If you haven't seen it, watch it. If you have seen it, check it out again. There's a lot going on in that movie. When Emma Stone comes out to the I think it's the Bryant Park fountain. She comes to this fountain, which represents her one of her mothers, and she has these small soliloquies in front of this fountain. The last soliloquy, about a half hour before the movie's over, I think 36 minutes before it's over, this tremendous soliloquy. I've watched this a number of times, and Emma Stone is really a really good actress, and she pulls it off. It's really worth it. So I think we did everything I was going to do today. We covered Mort, Sahl, the GMOs, Biden with a bag of shit in his hand going to Europe, and then the positive news, the microdosing and mindfulness, Bill McKibben with a positive note on divesting from fossil fuels, and Geraldo Rivera standing up to some of the lies on Fox News. Other than that, if you need a couple hours to sit back and watch a movie, check out CRUELLA. I'm going to try to do a few more movie reviews in the future. I have a few that are in the bag that I never got around to, Wonder Woman being one of them, and the series with Nicole Kidman being another. That's it for the night. Peace, patience, persistence. Happy Halloween, and we'll see you as soon as we can. Thanks for joining.